Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, a great presentation by Yellow AI. Of that, now we move on to the next panel session. Very interesting and very powerful topic and subject, CXO panel, building the Indian NBFCs for the next decade. And to discuss on this wonderful panel, I have with me a plethora of experts of the same domain from the NBFC sector. So let me introduce, without further delay, our honorable panel members in sequence. Joining first, we have Mr. Mehernosh Tata, the CEO from Edelweiss Retail Finance Limited. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Tata.
Thank you.
Joining next, we have Mr. Ishpreet Gandhi, the founder and managing partner from Stride Ventures. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Gandhi.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have Mr. Ravi Subramanian, the MD and CEO from Shriram Housing Finance. Welcome to the panel, Mr. Subramanian.
Thank you, sir.
Joining next, we have Mr. Bhavik Hathi, the Managing Director from Alvarez and Marshall India Private Limited. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Hathi.
Thank you, Bhavik.
Joining next, we have Ms. Pallavi Srivastava, the co-founder and director from Program. A very warm welcome to you, Ms. Pallavi.
Thanks, Sana. Thanks, everyone. Great to be here.
Joining next, we have Mr. Suhail Samir, the CEO of BharatPe.
Thanks, Sana.
A warm
Thanks.
welcome to you. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Samir. And now,
Thank you.
ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the moderator of this panel session, Sachindra Nath, the Executive Chairman and Managing Director from Ugro Capital.
Thank you, Sana.
A warm welcome to you, Mr. Nath. So, all over to you, the captain of the ship and the moderator of the panel. I am looking forward to a fantastic session of all the experts here, and of course, the moderator, Mr. Nath. I am sure the panel is in wonderful and able hands. Hope we have a fantastic panel. So, all the very best, dear panel members. Wishing a great success in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. I think so. When we talk about building the NBFC of next decade, I am so privileged that I have sets of people who come from the past and who come from the future. So it's a combination of people who have seen, done it, the entire alternative lending space. People like Ravi Mehernosh, and also the future, which is Suhail and Pallavi. I fit somewhere in between actually, and also we have an investor like Ishpreet and somebody who look at operative metrics of multiple NBFCs, Bhavik. So I think so. We are it's very exciting to discuss NBFC in last 2 decades or 2.5 decades since I've been seeing. It's a segment of the market which people have looked at very differently. It's in a hot and cold sector. Some sets of people have always believed that the lending is only the prerogative of bank, and obviously there are certain set of people who believe that banks cannot do the job which alternative lender or NBFCs can do. Actually, market is now at the moment is at that very unique inflection point. I say that NBFCs are becoming banks are becoming fintech, and fintechs are becoming NBFC. So we don't know where we all stand. So it's become kind of a round cycle. I won't take much of time. We have this exceptional panel, and we'll start immediately. And let me come to the youngest, the hottest, somebody who is creating wave around the lending industry, Suhail. And we would love to hear your view in terms of how do you think of digital banking and your views of how the landscape of banking, especially from from a fintech and a combination of a new bank which licenses are participating. What is here? What we can expect to come from players like you?
No, thank you very much, and thank you for calling me young. First of all, I think this is it is rare in my company. I'm definitely one of the oldest people around. I think it's a very interesting topic and a very interesting question. I think as we started BharatPe, we were very clear that the boundaries between what a bank does, what an NBFC does, and what a fintech does will continue to get blurred, right? Because a lot of us, like BharatPe, started with payments, with most of us being very clear that payments is not something where money can be made long term, right? Especially in the Indian ecosystem. It's a very different ecosystem where margins are generally wafer thin. This is not US where a retailer will probably earn 25 to 35% margin, and therefore will happily pay you a couple of percentage points to take his money. Typical retailer I go to, if I offer him a proposition of a 2% MDR, will tell me, you are telling me that I will get my money in my bank account 2 days later, and you are going to charge me 2% for that. What's wrong with cash, right? So, and therefore, sort of, at least we from the beginning were very clear that eventually we have to move towards the NBFC digital bank type setup. And I think the SFB license sort of has accelerated that journey for us. I think as we sort of go ahead, I do see these lines becoming more and more blurred, right? And a lot more fintechs moving towards where typical NBFCs and typical banks operate, which is sort of the core part of the monetization becoming lending, right? So I think how we will do it may be sort of slightly different, which will be a very heavy digital presence with branch network sort of supplementing versus being the core. Like at least the way we think about the SFB, we want to sort of run. I would be surprised if we even at a pan-India level have more than like 100, 150 branches for like 600, 700 cities we operate in, right? So it will be heavy digital onboarding, heavy digital products, everything which is suited to be sold without actual physical intervention, right? So everything from unsecured loans to like loans against gold, which are done in a new age way, like for example, how a Rupeek in the NBFC space operates. But sort of the same set of products which a conventional bank offers, but hopefully to a new segment of users which a conventional bank sort of shies away from underwriting, right? So therefore, I don't necessarily see this as a competition. I see this as sort of expanding the market and adding a lot more sort of users into the banking system, a lot more sort of credit users into the system, which we all know is still a massively under-penetrated play in India, right? So and that's why at least my sort of core thinking is we will do more of what banks do, but we will not be trying to take away share from the banks, because you can never compete with the bank's cost of capital. But you would like to sort of open up new user cohorts, new sort of demographics, which a conventional bank has not been able to cater.
Excellent. So I think that's what how future looks like from the eyes of Suhail. I would like to come to Pallavi, because I think so the whole landscape of digital lending and how conventional banks have been looking at it, which is supplementing by a very heavy physical infrastructure, relying on paper-based underwriting and touch and feel of lending. It is conventionally it is said that unless you see a customer, meet the customer, lending is difficult. How players like you are thinking about it, and is there a merit in intermarrying the conventional thought with digital thought, and how you are taking it up next decade, how you are seeing this evolving?
So, Sachin, I think, we are at a very interesting juncture, and, where we are seeing technologies slowly becoming the hygiene, right? So customers are becoming more demanding, and they have a lot of choices available with fintech players like, BharatPe, ourselves coming into and going out of the way to deliver a world-class customer experience, right? So clearly and undoubtedly, digital is going to be the future of lending and finance and everything else, right? So, and the data is going to significantly transform the way we look at customers and how we deliver value to them. So I think, from where we look, we see that there are three fundamental shifts that are going to happen very clearly. One is that as we generate more data, as we bring more customers on digital platforms, transactions moving digitally, from erstwhile where we used to look at customers being lendable or not from a bureau lens, we are now going to see a shift where everyone is lendable, right? So you will have more and more alternative sources of data available, and dependence on bureau data reducing, and therefore more and more new to credit, new to banking customers getting into the purview of financing. So that's a shift we are already seeing happening with digital and fintech players coming forward. Just looking at the GST data, for example, right? It's so rich that you're really not dependent on any other sort of data to make credit and lending decisions, right? So companies which are flow of money, we're talking about embedded financing. So the financial transactions data itself is a very meaningful data to take underwriting decisions and give credit to these customers. So that's on the financial inclusion side. The second fundamental shift that we are already seeing is happening is that every geography is becoming serviceable, right? So we're seeing that, and I think post COVID, we are seeing a lot of steps where you have now VKYC, e-sign. At least for us, it's been a big change where we used to do paper signing. Now everything end-to-end journey is digitized. All our customers are in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 towns. So there is clearly a huge change from the time where we were doing things pre-pandemic to now. So the entire digital OTD onboarding to dispersal journey is becoming digital. So that's the second shift that we are seeing. And finally, I think with efficiencies building up, technology, and digital interventions improving the way of working, the cost and turnaround times are going to reduce significantly, right? So customers are going to benefit from this. So that's broadly the third shift we are seeing. Earlier, banks used to take 21 days to now, NBFCs bringing that TAT down. So now fintechs actually giving credit within 24 hours. So that's the shift number 3 that we are going to see with use of digital and data. And I think more importantly, which is cross-cutting it while you are enhancing your reach, your customer, broadening the customer base, I think monitoring will become more, a bigger challenge. But at the same time, I think that's also where data and digitization is going to play a role, because you will have better mechanisms for fraud detection and monitoring, and and also embedded financing, looking at the transactions data and taking calls basis that, so better monitoring and control. So I think broadly from our perspective, these are the changes that we're going to see going forward.
Excellent. So I think so that's a very interesting intersection. We have Suhail, who believes that digital would take over physical. We have Pallavi, who's relying upon the future of digitization and how that can actually service and make customer at center point. I think one other thing in credit industry has been that we don't think that or see this as a customer servicing business, because we think always this is as a business wherein the customer has to come to us rather than we going to the customer. And on that, actually, it would be very interesting to hear both Ravi and Mehronosh, because Ravi, who has spent almost now more than 2.5 decades and have seen both the whole world and is now seeing this change happening, and have an established business as a part of an ecosystem which has survived in that traditional world. And how difficult it is. One is the belief of the level of digitization and how future would change, and how difficult it is to turn an existing engine and mold it towards digitization. So I'll start with Ravi and then go to Mehronosh.
Okay, thanks, Sachin, for this opportunity for sharing my views. I was listening to both Sohail and Pallavi sharing their views, and I'm quite in agreement with most of what they're saying. However, I would just like to park that thought aside for a minute, because if you go back and look at where are fintechs today making a huge difference, and that's largely in the small ticket, largely in unsecured lending space. Because I pardon my saying that, because there you're burning somebody else's cash, right? You are actually the data points that you have to make your decisions are limited, okay? But you are actually taking a huge amount of risk, and that risk leads you to create a loan, which then gives you the data points for further lending. So that's the premise under which the entire fintech industry today is largely operating. Give and take a few other this thing, but that's the premise on which the industry is largely working. Now, we just cut over to the secured industry, which we are, Mehronosh and I, and partly yourself are a part of. by and large, the secured industry uh, is also getting technologically advanced, is also digitizing, is also kind of layering a layer of fintech on top of the traditional age-old method of look in the eye method of underwriting. But the land records are not digitized. Okay, so essentially the title search, the valuations, and all are pretty much manual. Yeah, there are a few companies which have come up which are kind of sharing digitized land records in some areas, but there's a lot of work to be done. So that is something which kind of prevents you from digitizing the entire process. The second thing which probably is happening today, which people are turning a blind eye to, is the fact that uh, a lot of focus is being put on digitizing of existing processes. Whereas if you want to change and you need to undergo a digital transformation and not just an adaptation of technology and just changing the existing process and overlaying technology on top of it. I think that's a change which that's something which needs to change dramatically if the industry has to start moving towards embracing technology and kind of working on it. What's also helping us, while these are the negatives, but also what's helping us is the fact that a lot of youngsters are coming in for housing loans today. For example, your young borrowers and millennials uh, with reasonably high aspirations and commensurate disposable income also are seen as an attractive audience for housing loans. Roughly about 28 to 30%, if I remember correctly, is the kind of number that segment is actually of the entire home loan portfolio, which falls into that particular segment. And that segment is upwardly mobile, embraces technology, willing to experiment, and probably will is not willing to wait. So you need to, if you need to really kind of cater to that segment, you need to go ahead and make sure that you do business the way they want it to be done. And that's why embracing technology becomes a lot more important. And there are various artificial intelligence, machine learning tools available which kind of help you to use data analytics. But I think at this point in time, the secured industry, all that is being given a lot of lip service, but in the final analysis, that look in the eye has not gone away. Okay, most organizations, and I say most, I would hazard a guess here and say 95% of the loans that happen today in the secured world, largely housing loans and loan against properties and SME loans, happen with physical personal discussions with the customer and then deciding on giving him a loan. The only place where this is done away with is probably small ticket loans where the risk is pretty high, but the companies are willing to take the risk. So to cut a long story short, there's a long way to go before we embark on a journey of complete digitization of the process. It needs digital transformation and not just transforming the process onto a digital overlay. And I think it also needs a fair bit of data to be available, which it is not at this point in time. For the loan sizes that we talk of 10, 12, 15, 20 lakhs, the kind of data that we have is insufficient to completely use a scoring model and go ahead with it. Now, I don't know whether Mehrnosh has a different experience, but well, the journey has begun. Okay, now how long the journey will take is anybody's guess. Uh, I would be stupid and foolhardy to kind of ignore the fact that the winds of change have started blowing. So we have to either adapt or we'll perish. So, but I still would sound a word of caution that relying entirely on digital means of underwriting and fintechs for underwriting the kind of loans that all of us do is it's not easy.
I so Ravi, as a moderator, I would not put a judgment on this, but I think so. This is where actually exactly the lending industry is. It is, it is divided by poles apart in terms of, I call it collateral to cash flow based underwriting, especially for small businesses. The way we have seen that, given that assessment of a small business was very difficult, lenders relied upon collateral. But given the flow of transaction and the interlinkages which is happening through OCEN and through massive amount of digitization, it is gradually moving to transaction based underwriting. how much of that can be achieved, and how much of that, and especially one point which NBFCs have to always accept. So I think so fintechs, because which are largely funded by equity capital today, that how much of that can be absorbed or accepted by the liability side of the NBFC spectrum is
Correct.
also a
Correct.
key parameter to see. So Marinosh,
Correct.
your thought,
Correct.
how you are turning the wheel of
So
starting
one
a
last
business.
point before you move on to Marinosh, Sachin.
Yeah.
Marinosh and I used to work for City about 20 years back, and I used to run North for them. And we used to do mortgage loans in a particular fashion. And Mark, kind of believe me, nothing much has changed in the industry from 2000 when we used to underwrite loans in Citibank till now. Very little has changed in the mortgage industry in terms of underwriting and processing of loans.
Marinosh.
Yeah, thanks, Sachin, thanks, Ravi. Look, I think the way I look at it is there are clearly, winds of change, and the piece that I would talk about is more around the MSMEs, Sachin, where we are looking at the largely the micro small enterprises, not so much the medium enterprises. I think they are well banked with banks. We're clearly seeing three big, winds of change. One is in terms of formalization of MSMEs. From 4% of MSMEs in 2015 who were registered, you have now almost 16% of MSMEs who have a formal registration. So within 5 years, we are seeing clearly a 4x increase in just the sheer registrations of MSMEs, either on the GST or on the Udyog Aadhaar earlier, and currently the Udyam portal. The second thing we are seeing is a shift in digitization, which all of us have been speaking about. Ability to use microservices to be able to decision a client faster, cheaper, and probably more accurately. And third, I would say is just all of this is in a way getting democratized through the amount of data that is available, whether it is India Stack, whether it is many other platforms through which you can actually now through the customer consent get the data. Right? So I think that clearly these three changes we are seeing. And I would just like to add that as part of lending, I think on the secured lending side, as Ravi rightly said, it will move from a high touch to a phygital model. The phygital model is where you will use some microservices, some amount of checking that you can do, either whether it is GST, ITR, tomorrow a few other things like KYC, etc., and make it more seamless for the customer. And therefore you move from being very physical heavy towards some amount of digital, and we call it phygital. On the unsecured lending side, which is also one part of the business that we do, there the journey can be more STP, which is straight through processing, depending on the ticket size and again on the risk appetite that you would have. Because for Edelweiss, I think we are not funded by VCs or PEs, and therefore it's our own equity capital. And as Ravi rightly put it, you want to be sure that you're lending to the right cohort of customers within the credit cost that the organization would like to have. Over there, I would believe the level of digitization can be much higher, given the ticket sizes are smaller, given the tenors are smaller, and the fact that these are loans where the end customer ultimately would like a decision to be much faster. For the secured lending side, I don't think today there is a customer demand that it needs to come in 2 days or 3 days. The customer, I think, is more looking at value, is more looking at what cost efficiency he can benefit by offering that one or two collateral. And therefore, I think there are different yardsticks that one needs to really look at when you look at both these products from an MSME point of view. We all know that there is enough demand. So I think there is, for us as an NBFC sector, I would say the biggest change I have seen moving from a bank to an NBFC has been that your last mile connectivity with the end customer is very strong, unlike banks. Public sector banks are clearly challenged. They are just not able to get out of their branches to be able to offer lending to the client. Private sector banks have done some amount of work over there. But again, I would say the most nimblest in this lot would be the NBFCs who have a strong last mile connect with their customers. And where we can all use data and digital very strongly to augment or to get the right set of customers that you would want, so that from a overall P&L point of view, you are in line with what the thinking is. So that's broadly my view. we need to be part of the change that is there. I spoke about formalization, digitization, data democratization. And I think all of us pretty much concur on the fact that if we don't adopt digital ways, it will probably lead to extinction of an enterprise. So therefore, the degree will be different. We are not digital natives, we are digital incumbents. And to that extent, there is a very different challenge for organizations like us, more culturally than anything else, to be able to get the last mile, looking at it differently than the earlier paper that he or she was very comfortable with.
No, thank you, Manoj. And I think it is very clear that when you and Ravi talk about and you categorize lending in a product construct, secured versus unsecured. And when Suhail and Pallavi talk, they talk about the need of customers. So I think so this is a big contrasting change. It is need versus product and how we are all groomed to look at things, right? And I think so to some extent, I think so Manoj, Ravi both would agree that the conventional lending institutions, especially the NBFC, are also constrained by the way the providers of capital, which is the debt side, look at them. So probably at the deep in the heart, some of NBFCs know that level of digitization, what you call unsecured actually is a need-based financing, wherein the customer doesn't have a collateral, but the credit quality can be good. But we don't do it because we think that we will not be able to fund that customer. But I think, but both sides of the spectrum, the gentleman who can tell us what he sees when in a retrospect when he looks at the portfolio, because Alvarez Marshall in India, largest number of BFSI transaction, its diligence goes through them. They look at every type of company in India, both large NBFCs, banks, and other financial institutions. So Bhavik, where the truth lies, what this future generation of highly digitized, not looking at collateral, but trying to fund every need of a customer, and the kind of portfolio which is emerging, the future trend of that, versus what the secured lenders, which conventional knowledge says that the yield to loss ratio curve and secured to unsecured loss ratio curves are very well established. Are you seeing breakout happening in the portfolios which you analyze?
Sure, Shavindra. I think very, very fascinating conversation, and there's something that we've been sort of hearing for the past, I would say, 3 to 4 years, right? 5 years, where industry has been divided between, whether to go digital, whether to stay, the traditional models. I think what we are seeing is some successful models have been where there's a blend, right, which I think is known as phygital, right, where I think there's a healthy mix of digital intervention backed up by physical where required, right? So just to give you some sense and blending what I think everyone on the panel just mentioned, right? There are certain kind of products which are more amenable to digital lending, right? Small ticket loans, as everyone has been talking about, right? Small ticket loan, just because of the fact that the smaller ticket loans, shorter tenor, doing it the physical way just is not cost efficient, right? So that makes a lot of sense. It's more volume driven, more controllable given the shorter tenures, and hence, digital makes a lot of sense. And typically, these are also availed by customers, who have some digital footprint, right? So you are able to gather some relevant data, right? And then there are certain products, right, which are also amenable to digital lending, right? Even if there are certain, say, larger ticket loans, right? For example, we've seen supply chain financing. I think Manoj talked about MSME kind of lending, right, where certain data points which are more reliable, right, are emerging, right? Be it the GST data where we spoke about income tax returns, or just the anchor customer giving you the relevant data, right? So we're seeing those kind of sort of businesses also actually using digital and being fairly successful. I think where I think one needs to sort of focus on is also the fact that thanks to COVID, right, the digital adoption has increased significantly, right? For customers who are probably not very comfortable, right, they're using digital means, have started using digital. a lot, right? A lot of it has been forced. And when I say customers, I include retail customers, right, who used to now buying groceries online, used to buying, pharmacies online, maybe even selling their cars online, right, which probably 5 years back was not thought of, right? And hence the requirement or the demand and the comfort of using digital means, right, to transact even for seeking loans, right, is significantly higher. So the customer expectation is changing and changing very frequently. And what we are seeing is, and to coming back to your point, right, in terms of how the pools are performing, right? I think clearly, I would say about 3 to 4 years back, I think a lot of the algorithms that we used to look at, a lot of portfolios we used to look at where it was completely digital, right? No touch, completely algorithm based. There we've seen a significant a deterioration in the initial stages. And I think Ravi also mentioned it, right? That there has been some kind of a learning, right? You learn by mistake, and these algorithms are designed to learn through machine learning and other artificial intelligence tools to learn by mistake. So they're designed to have certain defaults, learn from the defaults, and make sure the next set of loans don't have those same errors sort of creeping in, right? And hence the business model designed in such a way that there are defaults, and we've seen some of these pools actually showing all of those trends. But at the same time, we've seen those same companies actually coming out and starting to now show much better performance. And COVID has really helped, right, for these kind of companies, because it's really shaken up and as a lot of people talk about, and when we do our work, right, a lot of people talk about stress testing. I mean, COVID, obviously there's been a lot of stress testing that's happened in the industry, right from demonetization, GST, but COVID has been the longest in terms of duration, right? So even people who were able to say, give some top-up loans or do some kind of a I shouldn't use the word, but evergreening, right? Have found it very difficult, right, to do it for such a long period of time. And that has really helped even the fintechs, right, learn from some of those mistakes, where we've seen actually fintechs taking a step back in the last 1.5 years, not lending as much and working on the algorithms, working on the customer segmentation, refining the product, relying more on pure data rather than just SDK based data extracted from mobile phones or apps and those kind of things, right? So I think the industry, especially the fintech industry, we've also seen has matured significantly, especially in the last 1.5 to 2 years, right? And we're seeing that as and I personally believe that will really help the overall fintech industry mature and grow. I mean, last 1.5 years, probably the industry has matured 5 years, right? So that's something good. I think what we're also seeing for traditional businesses like housing or other businesses, there people are already starting to say segregate between underwriting on say the collateral as well as underwriting the customer. I think what the customer now wants is a certainty of loan, and very quickly, gradually, because they're so used to pressing a couple of buttons on their phone, right, and getting what they want, right, from groceries to food to everything else. They want to make sure that at least they have some sense on the loan sanction, right? Obviously, the collateral sort of underwriting will happen, the technical, the legal sort of underwriting will happen. And hence, people are now trying to segregate between customer and underwriting and onboarding and the property or the other collateral sort of underwriting. And that's a very interesting way of looking at it, right? And that's something that we think will be the way forward, right, for businesses like this, where there'll be a good, healthy mix of digital underwriting of customers mixed with this kind of lending, and that also helps in also underwriting, or rather reducing the OPEX significantly, and also reducing the fallouts, right? If you see the funnel of customer where you prospected a customer to what you finally sort of underwritten, right, and sanctioned, that sort of also is reducing significantly the fallout, right, in between, if you are able to sort of give some kind of a decisioning much faster, right? So again, that's something that we are seeing, and also interestingly, for some of these customers where there has been a mix of physical as well as digital underwriting, they're actually seeing the performance to be much better. Just to coming back to your question, right? Because what you're doing is you're combining certain digital footprints which cannot be created overnight, right? That's a digital footprint which you created over a period of time, right? Versus in a physical environment, we know what kind of frauds happen, what kind of sort of documentations get created, IT returns get filed for 3 years in a day, right? So those kind of things, when you marry with some digital footprint, which is over a longer period of time, which has got much more richer in the last 2 years thanks to COVID, right, is actually really helping people take a much more better underwriting decision as compared to what it was maybe a few years back.
Excellent. I thought you would definitely tell us. Good thing is that what I hear from you, you are saying both would survive. And that I think so is true somewhere. But let me come to.
I think in a country like India, Sachin, I think you can't have just one model, right? It's just so vast, so diverse, right? I mean, it'll have to be a blend.
Yeah. So let me come to Ishpreet, the people who we all work for, directly or indirectly, right? Because end of the day, lending is business of capital. And where the mind of the capital provider and Ishpreet represent them. And, given that they are putting their money into new age platforms like PropCap, JetWork, which is not a lending platform, but embedded, credit is there. CredAvenue, which is a marketplace platform. And why, Ishpreet, if I may ask you this question point blank, why you're finding the digital new age platform more attractive than, a tried and tested platform which grows 20%, 30% every year, have delivered return of 30% CAGR, 18-20% ROE. So what is happening? Why, what is being missed by old boys versus the new boys, and why you guys are putting capital for the future only?
No, that's an interesting sentence. Thanks for having me, Sachendra, and a great discussion, very intriguing. I think it's a classic discussion around fintechs versus NBFC and the adoption of technology across sectors. So luckily had the privilege of working in this industry for 6 years, and since we primarily back venture capital, private equity backed companies, our thesis has always been actually, Sachendra, what you said fundamentally doesn't change for either of that, whether you're talking about traditional NBFCs or fintechs. Your fundamental remains. I funded a company in 2015-16 called Off Business when they were a Series A company. They've come out really strong. And that time also, I remember there was a transactional-led data which Ashish and Ruchi had a thought to fund, right? And that resulted into a vendor financing, embedded finance. There can be various terminologies around that. But I think technology was always an enabler to do it. It was not that it is a standalone NBFC or it is a standalone digital platform. It was always meant to be a standalone NBFC using transactional data and funding the borrowers who are new to credit. And I think if you see trends right now also in fintech, if you see this year, for example, you have almost $100 million checks in 6 companies. All 6 have very unique ways of identifying their customer set. I think all of them are trying to find a very, very differentiated way of reaching to new credit. And that remains the first scope of lens which attracts capital. That how you're finding that end borrower. Are you competing on a similar market or you are penetrating into a new to credit? I think that defines largely where the capital follows, because you're trying to open the market. I think Ravi mentioned about traditional NBFC embracing tech, and someone else mentioned about being phygital. I think it's all about embracing the technology where it's required, whether you want to use it for collections, whether you want to use it for your operational expertise, whether you want to use it for acquisition. Fundamentals remains cost of capital is the raw material, and everything around that, which is your operating expenditure, your collections mechanism, your NPAs, all of them, what ROA you derive out of a transaction, what NII you derive out of transaction, and how sustainable that book can grow. I think the companies who are gaining valuations, and that's where I think a slight mismatch is. So you see a classic business like Five-Star Business Finance. Now they're an NBFC. I don't think the guys have adapted too much of technology. They've come out roaring in terms of their valuation. They're planning a IPO round, and they're profitable, or business profitable. They're A-rated companies, right? So I think some of the new age companies, we really like PropCap. We've invested in them. Credit Avenue. The way of using the transactional data to fund the end borrower is the differentiated factor. Now, how much you can generate a lifetime value out of that, how much it can be only limited to you versus getting it open towards other NBFCs, how banks will look at it, this ecosystem. I think banks are playing smart. As an ex-banker, I can tell you that the neo-banking embracing, which everybody is talking about, is about embracing certain technology which they're building themselves in order to make sure that they ultimately get up to have certain bit of new credit MSME and personal loan segment, which is entirely different. Since we've been looking at this space for 4-5 years, a lot of companies we see they're actually fundamentally they're not doing too much of value add. They're acquiring digitally, right, from the web with the high cost of acquisition, and they're spending the same borrower. Now it can be subjective whether the CIBIL is low or high, what kind of transactional data they're using. But there the value add is limited versus some of the other players who are using the transactional data where getting new to credit entry fairly deeper, and the penetration can be significant because they're creating a strong moat for themselves. There the replication would be difficult. So I don't think it has to be a standardized bucket about a fintech digital lender versus an NBFC. I think how you use that and penetrate the way some of the people have shown in 5 years, I think is very critical in this juncture of looking at any company who gain capital and how they utilize that capital. One aspect again is to use that capital judiciously. Since you've funded Credit Avenue, we know that there's a lot of inorganic growth all of these companies are looking at, which can be good for their collection mechanisms, their operational mechanisms, in order to make sure that they consolidate their initial offering to go deeper. Right. So I think fundamentally everybody will have their own way. It would not take away anything from the traditional NBFCs. They'll go to their, as you rightly mentioned, it's a dead penetration. Low penetration is far under penetrated in India. You're talking about 30% CAGR for a lot of good NBFCs, which still exist and still continue to exist. I don't think it's a winner takes all market. I think those mix and match will happen. Digital adoption by banks and NBFCs is the way to go. And similarly, for the companies who are gaining grounds on fintech, how they penetrate is the way. Where they actually consolidate or end up merging is very interesting. I think that's what we have to watch next 12 to 24 months. But it's very exciting times, to be honest. Very fascinated in terms of what's happening, and a lot of experience. They're actually hiring experience. They're going in organic. So it's a very, very good intersection we are at currently.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. On off business, Ishpreet, actually, I know Ruchi in 2018 when I was starting, he came in my Gurgaon office. I chatted for 10 minutes. We gave her a small term loan, and I came back in the evening. I wrote to all my management team saying, watch these two young people and they will build a very fabulous business. Yeah. And the response I got from almost all of my management team, अरे ये सब नए बच्चे लोग आके कुछ भी स्टार्ट कर देते हैं, देखते हैं 2-3 साल में इनको पता लगेगा कि lending ये सब नहीं होता. Lending is a very different business altogether, right? I actually last round when it happened, I reminded most of those people who still exist in the company that actually this is where the problem exists, of being able to live in and believe in what we have been doing for a long period of time. There is a very massive value attached to that, but being able to unlearn that and learn something new is difficulty. And on that intersection, actually, Suhail, sorry, yes, Ishpreet.
No, at small points, Sachin, I think that's where I think some of the CXOs and the CEO of the banks are privy towards how they take what they take seriously and what they don't take seriously. I think it's very important to differentiate that. You can't take all this in a light manner as well, and at the same time embrace certain things which are important for the businesses. I think that judiciousness would set apart some of the banks also going forward.
Yeah, and on that, actually, this is a very good segue to Suhail. Very quickly, how does the marriage of an entity which is led by very seasoned bankers, who think in a very different way when it comes to the lending and the credit business, partnering with you guys who are agile, young, who have base of customer who is in the high tenacity of payment industry, and you jointly want to build the next generation of digital bank. How that's going to happen? You're on mute. Sohail, you are on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think that's a question I get asked very often. And to be honest, we have sort of great respect for Centrum as a group, and Jaspal as an operator. He's sort of very well known.
Obviously, same as me. He's an investor to my company, so obviously I have great respect for him as well.
Absolutely. And we were talking off business. I'm an investor at off business. So I think lots of sort of businesses coming together. And I think they bring in sort of real expertise in handling large ticket loans, handling like supply chain finance, etc., which is sort of very new and by definition needs some element of sort of physicality to it. It's not, I think the trick is to sort of make it less physical for the sake of being physical versus only touching parts which necessarily need to be done in person. And I think they've been sort of working with us for the last 3 years as our managing our treasury and sort of seeing our business very, very closely. And I think a lot of this debate around being able to use equity money to grow, etc., is sort of great, but equity money follows only good businesses, right? So leave aside the last 12-month aberration where money seems to be following everything, but I think and a lot of fintechs spend tons of money. I spend a lot of money, and I'm sure a few people on the panel spend a ton of money on customer acquisition. But a customer acquired without having very good clarity around where a long-term value of that customer is and how does that compare to CAC doesn't work, right? So I'm very happy to, for example, in our business, because these are small loans, I have to keep the cost of disbursal and cost of collection low. I'm very happy to live with a 5% NPA. I think most people will sort of get incredibly worried at 5% NPA. In our business, if my NPA is 2%, I get worried because I say we are not being aggressive enough for chasing growth, right? Because it's a question of growth, NIM, and sort of NPA, right? You can't look at them in isolation. I think, and that's sort of the strength we build, right? So to take a product very quickly and scale it as long as the economics start holding by using technology and by using sort of digital means. I think where Centrum comes in is the core thinking of how underwriting should work, how a cycle approach needs to be looked at versus getting caught in exuberance of a first 3 months of sort of good performance. And they sort of become then the balance to sort of our exuberance, right? So I think to us, it's sort of a perfect match. We bring in all the technology and the product thinking and the marketing thinking and sort of disruptive growth thinking. And Centrum sort of brings in the classical banking knowledge and sort of keeps us guarded or keeps us in check, right? So, and that's what we're sort of hoping to build. I think we're all aligned, and that's sort of great testament to Centrum being a much forward-looking organization that we are going to be a predominantly digital led bank, and that's sort of the reason, to be honest. Jaspal and Centrum were the team which was asked to take over the bank, right? We were not, right? So I don't think RBI likes my face enough to say, Sohail, Samir, please come and run a bank for us. I think they wanted someone as sort of solid as Jaspal to come in and run it, and all testament to Centrum to say that we want to build a forward-looking bank, and digital and payment flows, transaction history, GST history, which all Pallavi spoke about, will be a core part of the underwriting and the core part of sort of scaling this. And they sort of invited us to partner with them, right? So all aligned, very early days. So I think the real answer to your question will be only known in a year from now. So let's keep our fingers crossed till then.
So we have 10 more minutes. So I want to come to both Ravi and Arunesh. Do you really think that the future of next decade of future of NBFC is constrained because you are NBFC? Because most of your portfolio construct, the underwriting, the debate versus secured, unsecured is driven from the fact that who provide you the liability. Because one of the advantages which banks have, no depositor of bank ever asks where you are lending. Because the name bank is attached to you, generally you get money and you lend wherever you want. So do you think that future of NBFC is being converted into a bank and not standalone?
I'll take that, and Ravi, you can add on. I think one of the things that we think the way it'll work is there are two sets probably of NBFCs, Sachin. One would be large parentage NBFCs, and they have the ability or the gunpowder, as you may call it, to continue to build on their asset flow, and over a period of time could look at becoming a bank. For example, Bajaj or some of these guys, right? On the other hand, you also have a second set of non-banks who would actually look at partnering with banks. And I think we would like to actually look at the future more as in partnership with banks, whether it is public or private sector banks. There are a lot of synergies that one can draw from each other. And therefore, as Bhavik also said, right, it's I think Ishpreet said, winner takes all is really not how it is, because the pie is so large that you are good at a few things. Your partner bank is probably not good at that. And can you actually have synergies between each other to be able to mutually then have a win-win-win between bank, NBFC, and the end customer? So the way we look at it is, I think the partnerships, whether it is under the co-lending model, I know that Ugro is doing some of it. We've been also pioneering that and are in discussions with a few other banks. These to us seem to be a good model. It keeps you asset light. It also ensures that you're true to the overall credit program that you've agreed with your partner bank. And second, I think ensures that the team that you're building is more driven through data and digital. I keep saying internally in our teams that digital transformation actually is not about technology, right? It's about your strategy, and it's about new ways of thinking. So it's not really upgrading your technology team, but really ensuring that are your strategic objectives, long-term strategic objectives, aligned to the way you want different domains, whether it is customer, whether it is competition, whether it is the data that you're looking at to be done more digitally than what it is today. So I would probably rest here with my comments. Ravi, over to you.
Ravi?
So I partly agree with Manoj on what he said in terms of the future is the one of partnerships, and you need alliances, you need partnerships with banks, you need co-lending propositions, etc. But I also believe somewhere, and that's where the entire debate creeps in, is respect in this industry largely comes forth from a few factors. Okay, and one of them is lineage. Second is your own size and scale and profitability. And somewhere down the line, the lending industry particularly doesn't seem to respect fee income as much as it does your NIMs, right? And thirdly, I think somewhere the industry does not seem to respect a high NPA and a high margin business as much as it used to do in the past. And so the problem which faces us today as an industry is, should we focus on unsecured high margins and then run up a high NPA and still deliver a 4% ROA? For example, you go to a bank with a 4%, 5% NPA, the bank is going to say, what the hell? Why can't you bring it down to 2%? And so the challenge is, what business model do you actually run? Sohail said that at 2% NPA, I would actually worry because maybe I'm not lending enough. At 2% NPA, I would really start panicking, saying, what's going wrong? So I think somewhere the mindsets are different. The mindsets need to align and find a common ground where the suppliers of capital and the lenders kind of find a meeting ground. Today, that meeting ground does not exist because what we can do is not exactly what my lenders are looking at. And and two, I think somewhere down the line, the regulatory supervision and all is also is an overhang, right? And it's like you bring in a bank kind of a regulation supervision onto NBFCs, then that defeats the basic purpose of an existence of an NBFC, because NBFC kind of is largely meant to step in where banks can't. And if you want me to wear my formal shoes and climb a mountain, it's not going to happen, right? So it's challenging times, but I think, as I always say, water will find its level, and I think the industry is large enough, the market's large enough, everyone will find their common ground and a place to play.
Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is an exciting conversation. Given a choice, we can go on and on. It's such a fabulous panel wherein you have, new age businesses which are promising to, take future in their hand. We have businesses which have done and delivered for a long period of time, and we have people like me who are actually at the center of it. We call ourselves Oxford. It's a Ford car driven by an ox, and that's why we become an Oxford. So I think so. On that note, if I would, we still have 4 minutes. I would say that if any one of you want to challenge each other because you come from different world and ask anything, please feel free to do. Otherwise, we will be winding up this session.
I think Sachin, there's no point challenging each other because there's no right or wrong here, right? In the sense that
Absolutely.
These are all points of view and perspectives, and I think all of us are right in some manner, and so maybe we can end with your perspective on this.
Oh, that's very difficult one. So as I said, we are kind of an Oxford. So the example which I was giving, Ravi, of 3 years or 4 years back, looking at a business like Off Business, and in my heart, I believe that that's a kind of model which is the future. But for my own team to get convinced about it and transition to something like that was a challenge. So I think the biggest thing, we all know that at least for a small business financing platform, what we are trying to build is that the future doesn't lie in collateral-based financing, because there is a limit to a collateral-based financing. And to that extent, I agree with Suhail that the economic model of absorbing some percentage of loss but being able to lend to a deserving customer is the model. But we get constrained, as Marunesh rightly or you rightly said, is by the lending universe which is available to us today, because that universe is not accepting that kind of model. So even the future of co-lending today, we have done some of the largest co-lending partnership with SBI, Bank of Baroda and IDBI, but none of that co-lending has come for our supply chain financing or our machinery and equipment financing or some new generation things which we are doing. They still come for our secured prime market lending, right? Which is not enabling credit where it should be. And that's why I think so. It's a journey which we are all trying to do in our respective ways. You're right. We are not challenging each other. Yeah, I think the next 3 or 4 years is really transformative. The power of data is here, and all of us has to embrace it. I think so. This first leg or first generation of that power of data is more in simplification of process technology. And now it has to move in terms of using of data analytics to underwrite the customer. Because what is being talked about fintech is nothing but it's just simplification of digitizing the processes which were manual. But there is very little effort which has been done in using data to underwrite customer and check his intent and ability. And that's where the focus would be. And the people who would be able to do that would be really transformative. So I think so this is about being able to lend or say yes to a customer in 30 minutes, do a digital KYC and all of that. I think so it's here to stay and everyone would embrace it. The winners, and Pallavi can probably say something on that, is about using data analytics to being able to underwrite the customer's intent and ability. And that's the winner model is in our view.
Yeah. Well said.
Okay. So I think that takes us to end. I think thank you very much. It was a very short time. I would have loved to come each one of you one more time, but I'll hand it over to Sana for the closing of the session, please.
Thank you so much. Indeed, it was a great panel discussion session. Thank you so much, Mr. Nath, for moderating the panel so well. And thank you so much, all the panel members, Mr. Mehernosh Tata, Ms. Pallavi, Mr. Ishpreet Gandhi, Suhail Samir, Mr. Suram and Mr. Bhavik Hadi. Fantastic having all of you here on a busy working Thursday and for giving time on such an important subject and topic. CXO panel building the Indian NBFCs for the next decade. Thank you so much, and thank you to all our viewers and attendees who are watching this event. So I'm sure a lot of takeaway from all those interesting people from such an expert panel like this. Thank you so much once again, and thank you, Mr. Nath, for doing the honor of moderating. Hope to see all of you in the next decade of in the next edition of India NBFC Summit. Thank you.
All right, Frankie. So